Hvala lepo. I want to thank first the organizers of the conference and especially also Mr. Sivadin Jovanovic for inviting me to this conference. It's the first time for me to be in Belgrade, and I'm very impressed by the conference and the attentiveness of all the participants here of this conference. I fully agree with what was said this morning. I mean, there was so much important things said this morning and this afternoon. I fully agree with what was said by Professor Yakunin about the unemployment and the shamefulness of what is happening in Europe now and in other countries on the world, what was said on poverty, and what was said by Mr. Yakunin, that there is no acceptance for theories who represent an anthropology of a superiority of states. I'm very grateful for what you said about this. In 1993, we started the European Working Group, Mut zur Ethik, which you could translate with courage to take a moral stance. In Switzerland, at a time, the Western world was faced by the serious situation in which all fundamental values and institutions were being eroded. We felt it was urgent that all bodies and forces working against these destructive trends join forces and form an active and effective opposition to them. The consensus among the international network, which has now grown, includes a personalist conception of men, the commitment to protect the family and marriage, and to establish a good system of education. Moreover, all groups are also committed to the constitutional rule of law and democracy, as well as to the coexistence between sovereign states based on mutual respect and to economies that serve rather than exploit mankind. We are also engaged in promoting the peaceful resolution of conflicts, not only on the personal, but also national and international level. Our conviction is that conflicts should be dealt with at the negotiation table. Even before the end of World War II, in 1943, the famous Swiss historian Adolf Gasser submitted proposals on how peace could be achieved. That means how such a disaster could be prevented to happen again. In addition to numerous lectures which he gave after the Nazi dictatorship in war-torn Europe, he wrote down his suggestions in a very readable book called Communal Freedom as Europe's Rescue. In it, among others, he explains that there are basically two opposing types of state systems. The one is built from bottom up and the other from top down. The first is the cooperative type, the second an authoritarian one. The cooperative nature is based on voluntary agreement and mutual trust, but also on mutual responsibility. The authoritarian state system is based on a centralistic command that makes use of a strong army and a tightly organized civil service. Only in the cooperatively built states can true freedom develop, because only there the moral forces are formed which may prevent a predominance of social and political contradictions. Alfred Gasser writes, quote, "The contrastive pair, dominion cooperative is perhaps the most significant contrast that is known in social history. The contrastive pair, authoritarian state, society state, is about fundamental things, namely the elementary foundations of human communal life. Quote end. Today, the cooperative concept receives increasing attention and dissemination worldwide. Cooperatives across all divisions worldwide offer more than 100 million jobs, which means 20% more than the multinationals offer. Approximately 1 billion people worldwide are members of cooperatives. Thus, the UN General Assembly has declared the year 2012 the International Year of Cooperatives. Especially in troubled times, in times of crisis, of rebuilding, when the political system is limited due to lack of funds, people are increasingly challenged to take initiatives themselves. Cooperatives in their various forms foster the participation of people in the economic and social development. They contribute to the eradication of poverty and make an important contribution to social peace. The cooperative principle includes fundamental values of human coexistence in equality, freedom, and it is oriented towards the common good. The principle of cooperation is fundamental. The historian Helmut Faust puts it like this, quote, "Uniting for mutual assistance in a community is also the simple sense of the cooperative concept. While it corresponds to human nature, its implementation embraces the highest ethos people can achieve." Quote end. The cooperative principle, therefore, does not only apply to economic and material issues, but includes the entire human nature. It is thus a basic anthropological constant. More and more people move away from the notion of the homo economicus and put the welfare of the people and the common good back at the center of their considerations. They do not consider the human being an only utility maximizing machine, but a moral person who is capable of taking decisions and actions based on an ethical foundation. It is the free and responsible people and not the market forces which determine the nature of our economic, social, and political actions. Considering different economic and social systems, we can see that it is in fact the cooperative movement which is deeply imbued with precisely that conception of man. From an anthropological perspective, cooperative interaction is an ancient form of human coping with life in self-help, self-responsibility, and self-management, which has evolved in different forms in many places of the world. The foreword in the booklet published by our cooperative newspaper Zeitfragen, Current Concerns says, quote, "In Switzerland, the community building and integrating element of the cooperatives has significantly contributed to the formation of a bottom-organized statehood with its direct democracy. The basic principles of cooperative interaction correspond to the basic principles of human nature. The freedom to regulate fate by human beings themselves, the awareness that it is necessary to take their fate into their own hands, and the cooperation, interaction for a common goal to the benefit of all. Cooperation in freedom, one for all and all for one, in other words, together for one another, the core principle of cooperative activities is fundamental to personal initiative, creativity, responsibility, and finally also for social and individual development, and is a constitutional element of the dignity of man. Quote end. Fundamental to the cooperative principle, as we understand it, is the personalist concept of man. The personalist concept of man sees man as a fundamentally social being whose personality fully develops in and through the community and who is capable of reason and ethics. Man is able to create culture and to set moral values. The personal concept of man is based on Christian values applicable to natural law, which are confirmed by psychology. The Swiss historian and psychologist, founder of the working group Mut zur Ethik and the newspaper Zeitfragen, Annemarie Buchholz-Kaiser, writes about this in her essay, Personal Psychology, the Contribution of Psychology and Education to Human Dignity, which dealt with the question how social responsibility and solidarity can be developed together with the fellow human beings. Quote, morality does not need to be imposed on the people. It has its roots in the empathy, which develops in a positive bond of the child to its first caregiver. The formation of conscience, ethical behavior, and moral sense, which take their beginning here, are rooted in human nature. Empathy and compassion are the qualities which put people in a position to assess the consequences of their actions for their fellows and cause them to behave in a socially responsible manner. Quote end. The individual psychologist Alfred Adler described the sociality of man in the concept of the Gemeinschaftsgefühl. There is not a good translation. You could translate it by social interest, but I leave it with Gemeinschaftsgefühl, which has been the core of his teachings. For Adler, humaneness is the basic structure of human existence. Man is a social being because he is only viable in the community and can only reach self-realization, life fulfillment, satisfaction, and contentment in the cooperative coexistence. Man can only become a human being in the community of cooperating fellow beings and thus contribute to peace. First of all, this has to do with his biological imperfection and the emerging helplessness and dependence. People are only capable of coping with the tasks to ensure peace and preserve life by joining forces with other people, by division of labor, and by cooperation. Gemeinschaftsgefühl is thus a biological fact. All cultural achievements, such as language development, have developed on the grounds of social interest, Gemeinschaftsgefühl. Cooperation, solidarity, and the principle of mutual aid are constitutive for the development of social interest, Gemeinschaftsgefühl, for the social progress of mankind and for peace. Thus, humanity is the real sense in life. Any form of striving for power, the lust for power, oppose the common sense diametrically and will lead to man's downfall. The basic principles of cooperative interaction, the association of people to help themselves in self-responsibility and self-government for a common purpose, corresponds to the nature of man. Cooperation in freedom and equality, self-determined and responsible action are essential. Cooperative principles are founded anthropologically, and in their content they correspond to the findings of psychology. They are essential for the development and for the preservation of social peace in a country. Thank you very much.